Hello, I'm Amir Zargara.
And I'm Jelan Maxwell.
I'm here with A Good Day Will Come. It's a short film about an Iranian wrestler um, who has to decide if he's going to stand up to the oppressive regime and be with his people, or essentially say nothing and be able to uh, continue to provide for his family. And inspired by a real story, a real person, Amir Zargara. Uh, of course, the film is fictionalized, but the character is inspired by it.
So I will start at the end. Based on that, start at the end of the film, and then we'll work our way back to the beginning. So you end with his quote,
Right.
The real wrestler's quote, and I was struck by it. Recognized it was obviously the different name from the character, but that I was going to ask. I'm assuming the character was based on this man.
Of course, yeah. So, again, yeah, the original version of the film that I was working on in the beginning was that it was a more docudrama style, based on facts, and yeah, and then after working on that for a while, I just realized that I couldn't really build the empathy I wanted it's like, and also in the macro things that was happening at the time. It was during the Massa and Mini protest. I was working on that, and then I just couldn't really build that empathy in the audience. I thought I was like, okay, if I expand the scope and go more fictionalized, and I think this version does that a lot better.
Okay.
And yeah, so again, I don't say in the beginning of the film I don't say inspired by real events in the
Right.
beginning, because it's I felt like that was not right per se,
Yeah.
you know. And then again, the quote is simply just like a dedication, essentially,
Yeah.
you know, to him. And but again, yeah, that's a wrestler who who went to the protest. Again, that event is fictionalized in the film, but
Right.
and was and had a sham trial and a course confession, and he's not with us anymore.
Can we talk a bit about the culture of wrestling in Iran? I mean, it's critical that he's a wrestler, right? You know,
Right.
he can't even just be a runner, an athlete, a basketball player. I mean, you know, in Iran, I remember this from growing up as a kid. You know, my understanding, we talked about the Olympics earlier, my understanding, early understanding about Iran was wrestling and the Olympics. So can you talk about why it was essential for this character, for wrestling to be our introduction to him?
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, and you said, if you're from Virginia, you said, right? And again, I know about Ohio being big in wrestling. I don't know about Virginia, but the
wrestling was, I was a basketball player, and it was like basketball players and wrestlers. So yeah,
There you
wrestling
go.
was big in my
So
high school.
it's big, right? So yeah, same in Iran. So it's like
Yeah.
it's just it's big throughout. Of course, there's like, you know, it's like the U.S. There's parts that are like massive. Of course, everybody wrestles, but it's part of the cultural identity for sure.
Yeah.
And it's also, you could see it as also somewhat, it's too much for the young wrestlers, because of everyone who's come before them have done so much for the people, and they represent this. Again, they're like superheroes essentially, right? Like, they're just like insanely high morals, have done all these great things for the country, for the people, beside the mat, off the mat, and then so they have these like high standards, these like young wrestlers to look up to, and they're like in their early 20s. It's a massive burden on their shoulder,
burden.
right? You know, so it's like, and that sometimes get lost, and like it's again, like people might judge them, or like, oh, like, why are you not support? And it's very tough, like the situation, you know. It's like, no one's wrong, like, no, it's like, you know, it's just, again, they have to think, you know, about it's very, again, it's all gray,
Right.
you know, and yeah, again, going back to your question of like how big that is, it's again, like, it's like one of my earliest memories is me and my dad in front of the TV. I was a few years old, like 3, I think, and every night I would have to like wrestle with him before going to bed, you know, like, and my tank top had to be like full of sweat before, like, otherwise I'm not going to bed. So that's how a part of the culture that is, for sure.
Where did you guys shoot the film?
Yeah, we shot it in
in Istanbul, Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah, which was hell of an experience.
I'm
for
sure.
Yeah, big cultural shock for me. Obviously, Amir, a little bit easier
Yeah.
for him, but yeah, it was a great experience.
So I mean, the setting was obviously hugely important to the film, and it felt authentic. I mean, it felt like Iran. I wasn't. You know, you see some of those movies that they say are set in New York, and it's in Canada. It's in Vancouver, and you're like, I'm sorry, that's not New York City. But this felt like it could have been Tehran. It could have been another. How did you, aside from set design, how did you achieve that through your photography?
So I mean, realistically, it was that's the kind of funny thing about like especially cinematography is like cinematography leans so much on production design.
Right.
I would say like that was probably the easiest part for me in terms of photographing it because, and I've mentioned this to Amir before, like the production design was so well thought out that like it actually just made my job so much easier because especially things like around color palette.
Yeah.
Because that was a big thing, and we talked about it a lot. Was like there's certain like colors in the film, like the green and the gray, and we talked about this like image that we wanted, like this sort of gray, sort of desaturated look. And honestly, it's the production design. Like it's the production design. Obviously, like there's a lot that went into the set design, the production design, like changing all the license plates and all those details and whatnot. But that's pretty much it. It was the production design that, and thankfully a lot of cloudy days as well.
Yeah.
That really
Gives
just
that
kind
muted,
of exactly, and it just kind of gave the feel. And I think so much of it is like the vibe that you expect when you think of like Iran and when you think of what you expect to see in this film. It's the production design and Turkey, just everything also in Istanbul just looks amazing. Like in terms of like the textures of everything, I think that has a lot of similarities to. I've never been to Iran for obvious reasons, but so I think it's mostly production design. So shout out Amir. Yeah.
Did it feel like Iran to you?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And again, so it's like it's nice to have like a perspective of someone who hasn't been to Iran because again, so like it goes back to like who's the film for, right? Like who's the audience for? Like, is it the people? Is it the diaspora who've lived in Iran and have left, or the next generation, or people who've never been to Iran who are like interested in the subject matter? And that's why so it's great to again that audience believes that in Iran. Again, I said like you believe that too.
Yeah.
And then of course like I could get hung up on a few things, but it's just like it's again like you realize those things don't matter. And again like when people like Iranians watch the film, they've told me they don't see anything. Of course like they're not looking with like a magnifying glass, but like again, in the first watch, they were always like, "Oh, like, where did you shoot this?
Yeah.
Like,
how did you shoot this?
How did you shoot this in Iran? Like, I was like, yeah, I wish, But
you had mentioned your father, and you had mentioned wrestling with your father in the film. The father figure has a critical role, and he's gone, and you never really say what happened to him. It's implied, and we through. The protagonist's mother, lamenting the loss of her husband, and we see the framed picture, and then we hear references to him as a wrestler, and how that character is then used to denigrate our protagonist when he's wanting to protest. Why did you decide to leave it to the audience to infer what happened to him instead of being explicit?
And this is it's a great question, and thanks for picking up on that. It was in the script that originally, like when our Arash is has interaction at the protests, with the commander.
Yeah.
There was a lot more dialogue there originally that gave more context to, again, just exposition of the father was also he lost his life again in the military defending the country and the people. And again there is a picture, a few seconds, when we established the home life of him, of a few people at war. So and again it's very subtle, but again as I say, he's referenced as this great wrestler. So and that was again I have to give again. Of course, I had a lot of problems with. I wanted to cut back as much. Again, I'm trying to be as visual as possible, right? And that's where of course Jelan a massive help, you know, because it's like, again, if the people who don't speak Farsi and watch the film with no subtitles understand what's going on, then I've done my job, right? Like, you know, and he's done his job. Like, you know, that's our goal, right?
Right.
So, and that's why, and it was on the day too, and you weren't there, you were like setting stuff up outside, because I still had more dialogue in that scene, and Sia, our lead, who plays Arash, he's like, yo, could I talk to you about the dialogue in this scene? Yeah, so that's how, bro, again, the actor is like through and through. That guy, he dedicated so much time for no money.
Yeah.
He had his own acting coach, his own wrestling coach, like full on dedicated. Like he brought.
Was he a wrestler himself, or did he basically learn?
So he comes from a martial arts background, but and has done wrestling again, like being Iranian, but never focused fully on it.
Okay.
It comes from like a taekwondo background and some and some other martial arts, and his dad was a taekwondo also international. So he was the one who's like, like what if you scale this like all the way back to the? He's like, yo, what's the core here, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like. And again, because I had brought up my concerns about the dialogue in that scene, and then to him in our in our previous meeting, and then on the day he's like, yeah, like, what if I'm just saying this, like it's like, I'm like, yeah, that's
strip it down.
It's strip it all the way down, because it's not about again, like it's not, it's, you know.
He says it all with his face.
Yeah,
that's it.
You know what? I mean, you captured that. And you know, there's a softness to his face, almost a pliancy when he's at the front. Of course, he told his mother he's staying at the back. Right. We know he's not staying at the back. Right. He's not the type of guy who would let others put themselves up front. But he says everything with his face. And the camera, you stay there, you linger on it. He didn't need to say anything more.
And that's the thing. It's the commander knows him and knows his dad.
And you can see the recognition.
And that's
you
the
don't
thing.
need to have them say, I know you.
Yeah.
You know he is recognized, and you know it's beyond who he is, you know, because of the commander's age, right? It's not a one-to-one with Arash and someone a peer. It's an older person. And so based on the things that you've already picked up, yes, I recognize you, Arash. I know who your father was. And it's conveyed without a word.
Yeah. And I feel like also, like, tone says so much more sometimes than dialogue.
Yep.
It's just like, I feel like sometimes you over-explain and it actually takes away from the tone. I think that's what we were like really trying to go for. I mean, we love like as little dialogue as possible. That's kind of the thing. And it's just like, you can say so much more with, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words, you know what I mean? And I feel like sometimes ambiguity can connect with people on such a deeper level than like specific, this is exactly what's happening.
It's more resonant.
It's more resonates exactly with the audience better.
So I'll confess that, you know, the moment is the commander says guns down, and I exhaled. I was like, oh, okay, he's okay. Shame on me for not anticipating what was going to happen next. And it's, you know, you're at the breakfast table, and okay, he got through it. His mother's worst fears were not realized. You know, he's going off to train, and we're okay. And then, of course, that's not what happens. Which is true to the story and true to the real story, but again, just a jolt, right? Why did you decide? I mean, you could have had him arrested at the protest. Why did you decide to let it play out the way it did?
Another great question. Yeah, I did have a draft that was more thriller focused per se, and then set up the other side more. So there would be and those, because again they actually do this in Iran, which is like they send people who are dressed as protesters into the protest, who are on the, and then they start you know, like snatching people or whatever it is they do, like, you know, and they have guns and what. So I had a version of that, which is also realistic, and this version again it's more dramatic.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I chose I think and again I really wanted to establish the commander as a commander who does take on, and again because it's like to me, and again in the feature film version of this that I'm working on now, I bring a lot more of all this stuff that we're talking about to life. Like the and the commander, it's again, he has to make a decision in that second, right? Like, so he looks back at the possibilities of like at the motorbikes, which is like, okay, like again, the commander, I'm sure, has a family, right?
Yep.
It's like, you know, so like, oh, like what that could mean for his family, for his job. Is he going to be able to provide for his kid? Like,
each one is facing that choice, just in a different circumstance.
In a different circumstance, and it's like, and that's why I was saying it's also gray. Like, it's like no one's bad here. Like, like people have just been placed in this. Again, I'm not in no position to judge anyone. Like, like people have just been placed in their positions because of various things that have happened in their life. So like. And again, so like people might say, like audience members might see that and be like, okay, he's making the right moral choice, right? But for who? Like, you know, for sure he's doing it to like the people that are there on Arash, but but for his soldiers, maybe their lives are now it's done for.
What does he put that? What scenario is he all of a sudden placed them in?
That's it, or his kid now. Maybe is his kid gonna be without a father? Like, so it's and then. The unfortunate thing that I get to in the following scene, as you mentioned, is that end of the day, and the regime's all power. Like there's no
what was going to happen.
What's going to happen.
And he gets shoved into the car, and then the film ends, and you don't need to see anything more after that. You know, right? You know what was going to happen is going to happen, and then you get the quote from the real life person, and that all of a sudden it's just more real, and that takes you out of the fiction. For me, it took me out of the fictional world into the lived world, and it's an emotional wallop. So I selfishly, I'm glad to hear that you're working on a feature version of this, because I think you have a bigger story to tell. There's a lot more room for you guys to go with this, but I think by doing it as a short, you offer just a glimpse for someone who can see beyond the headlines. You know, Iran is, we're talking here in August 2024, and all summer long we've been reading headlines from Tehran, but that's black and white, what we are seeing. And now the nuance and the gray and life choices come to life in just 20 minutes. So you both are to be commended for that, because I know it wasn't easy to do, but hopefully it's worth it. And I think for film goers will really walk away with a deeper understanding of the place, even though you weren't in the place, you brought the place to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.